Good morning, everybody. So, in the last session, we have seen about the nervous system, the introduction to the nervous system. So, we were seeing about the central nervous system, the structure of a neuron, and how the neurons can be classified. Okay, the neuroglial cells and their functions. Okay, about the peripheral nervous systems. What are they? The spinal nerves and the cranial nerves. How many spinal nerves are present and how many cranial nerves are present? Okay, and the names of the the cranial nerves. So we have done until this in our last class. So in today's session, we will be going in detail about the spinal nerve. Okay, so how does the spinal nerve look like? Okay, so the spinal nerve, it's a nerve which is arising from the spinal cord. We know that. Okay, but how does it arise from the spinal cord? It is arising from the spinal cord by two routes. Okay, so here you can see this is the spinal nerve. Okay, this is the spinal cord. So it's attached to the spinal cord by means of two routes. Okay, one is on the posterior side and the other one is on the anterior side. So the posterior route is also called as dorsal route, and this one, the anterior, it's also called as ventral root. Okay, so it is attached by two roots to the spinal cord, dorsal root and the ventral root. The dorsal root carries sensory impulses, whereas the ventral root carry motor impulses. So what does this mean? So suppose if there is a touch sensation, if someone touches, okay, so what happens? The impulses travel through the nerve, the spinal nerve, and then it goes through the dorsal root. It goes through the dorsal root, okay, and then enters the spinal cord. Okay, and once in the spinal cord, this has been processed, okay, and then it goes through the ventral root back into the spinal nerve. Okay, back into the spinal nerve. Okay, so that's why the dorsal root carry the sensory impulses and the ventral root carry motor impulses. Okay, the spinal nerve then divides into two more branches, dorsal and ventral rami. Okay, dorsal rami and ventral rami. We will see that in this picture. So here, yeah, in this one. So here you can see this is dorsal root, ventral root. This is the spinal nerve. The spinal nerve once again divides into dorsal ramus and ventral ramus. The dorsal ramus, dorsal, another name is for dorsal is posterior. It goes and supply the muscles and skin on the posterior aspect of the body. Okay, that is our back. Whereas the ventral ramus, so this supply the structures which are present on the anterior part of our body. Okay, so the dorsal supply the muscles and skin of the back, whereas the ventral supply the lateral and the anterior regions. So dorsal root and dorsal rami is entirely different. Okay, so here you can see this is dorsal root, this is ventral root. Okay, they join together to form the spinal nerve. The spinal nerve once again divides into dorsal ramus and ventral ramus. Now, in the dorsal root, you can see a small swelling. Okay, even in the other picture here also you can see there is a small swelling. Okay, this swelling is called as dorsal root ganglia. Dorsal root ganglia. It is also called spinal nerve ganglia. Have you read of this? Have you read about this anywhere else? Dorsal nerve root ganglion or spinal nerve ganglion. If you remember here, spinal ganglion, dorsal nerve root ganglion, or just one and the same. Okay. So what do they contain? They contain pseudo unipolar neurons. Okay, they are present in the, they have pseudo unipolar neurons. Okay, the spinal ganglion. Okay, yes. So here you can see the dorsal root, the dorsal nerve root ganglion, okay, and the ventral root. Okay, the dorsal root carries only sensory impulses. So what happens? The sensory impulses will be passing through the dorsal root, reaches the spinal cord, where it is processed, and then the motor impulses passes through the ventral root, okay, and then into the structures, let's say the muscles or the skin. Okay, so what happens if there is a cut in the dorsal root? Okay, if there is a cut in the dorsal root, which function is lost? The person will not be able to feel the sensation. Okay, touch, pressure, vibration, temperature. So these ones they cannot, they cannot find out. Okay, so the sensation is lost if the dorsal nerve root is damaged. Okay, if the ventral nerve root is damaged, what happens? The person can feel, but he cannot respond. Okay, he cannot move the hands. That is, he is paralyzed. Okay, he will be. Now, if you see the dorsal ramus and ventral ramus, the dorsal ramus contain both sensory and motor nerves. Okay, so similarly, the ventral ramus contain both sensory and motor nerves. Okay, so if these are damaged, both the sensory and motor, which supply the back of part of the body, is damaged. Whereas the ventral ramus, if it is damaged, since it's a mixed nerve, okay, mixed nerve contains both sensory and motor. So if this is damaged, then both the sensation and the motor impulses, they are lost in the anterior part of the body. Any doubts? Any doubts in the spinal nerves? So dorsal nerve root, ventral nerve root. Okay, dorsal ramus, ventral ramus. Both are different things. You need to know where they are present and what is their function. All right. Sometimes a picture may be given and they may ask you like what are all the structures. Okay, so what is this? Okay, they may give you usually a simple picture like this: dorsal root, ventral root, spinal nerve, dorsal ramus, ventral ramus. Forget about this gray and white ramus. Okay, it's not needed for you. Okay, so this is the nerve, the spinal nerves connecting to the sympathetic chain. Okay, and so you need not know this. Okay, this is for medical people, so I will discuss about this later on. Okay, not now. Okay, the dorsal ramus and the dorsal ramus and ventral ramus. Okay, so these are mixed nerves, whereas dorsal root and ventral root, dorsal is purely sensory and ventral is purely motor. Okay, now here you can see the afferent neuron. See what happens? The person is hit. Okay, so there is a sensation, thermal sensation. Okay, white, yeah, hot fire. Okay, is brought near the person. The skin, the skin receptors, they carry the pain sensation. Sorry, they carry the temperature sensation. Okay, it realizes that, okay, that there is a hot substance. Okay, and the receptors, they travel through the nerve. Okay, then it reaches the dorsal nerve root ganglion. Okay, and from the dorsal nerve root ganglion, it reaches the spinal cord. So in the spinal cord, it is processed. So it realizes that, oh, there is something which is hot over here. Then what does the person has to do? He has to move his hand away from the hot surface. So what happens? The motor impulses are then passed to the muscles. So the muscles then contract and then he moves his hand away from the hot surface. Okay, all these All this takes place in microseconds. Okay, so they take place very fast, even before we recognize. Okay, so this is the pathway which it takes place. Now inside the spinal cord, there is something C, which is the connector neuron. Okay, the connector neuron is the neuron which processes the information. Okay, it realizes that there is something, there is a sensory sensation. Okay, and then it processes it, and then it makes the effective reaction. Okay, so what would be the reaction? Okay, so if it is a hot surface, the person will move his hand away from the hot surface. Okay, so the processing takes place in the spinal cord. Any doubts?
Doctor,
No,
afferent and efferent, the difference between them what?
Afferent neuron is sensory neuron. A is an afferent neuron. Okay, now C is a connector neuron and B is a effector neuron. Nerve neuron are same. Nerve is a group of neurons. They form the nerve. Okay, a group of neurons. They form a nerve.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, coming to the next one, dermatome. What is this dermatome? The area of the skin that is supplied by a single spinal nerve is called a dermatome. Okay, so you know that there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves. Okay, we have seen it, right? So we have seen 31 pairs of spinal nerves. Okay, it's cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and 4 coccygeal. So each of these spinal nerve will supply a certain part of the body, a certain area of the skin. Okay, so the area of the skin supplied by a single spinal nerve is called a dermatome. Why this is important? Dermatome. Okay, the dermatome is important because suppose uh, if we want to find a person has got a road traffic accident, okay, and if and he is injured his spinal cord. If you want to know where exactly or which level the spinal cord is affected, you can test it by testing the sensation over the dermatomes. Okay, say for example, the person has got sensation on the upper part, but say from T10. Okay, and T10 it doesn't have any sensation. Okay, if from T10 he doesn't have any sensation, which means the spinal cord is affected at the level of thoracic spinal cord level 10. Okay, thoracic vertebrae level 10. Okay, so the thoracic vertebrae level 10. Okay, so if so by this we can find out which vertebrae level the injury has occurred even before we confirm it through the CT scan or MRI or through X-rays. Okay, so just by clinical examination, we can say which vertebra the lesion has occurred. Okay, at which vertebral level the lesion has occurred. Okay, to a certain extent, we can say that which level, the vertebral level, the fracture has occurred. Okay, if the spinal nerve is involved. So that's why this dermatome is important. Okay, so dermatome, the area of the skin supplied by a single spinal nerve. Also, you can use it for anesthesia. Okay, sometimes they will give anesthesia from a certain part of the body. Okay, so that the person will remain. It's called a spinal anesthesia. So what happens? They give an anesthesia. So only the person will remain conscious. In general anesthesia, the person will be sleeping. But in spinal anesthesia, this person will be awake, but he cannot feel the pain. Okay, so that is because from certain part of the body, okay, the person cannot feel the pain because they inject in the spinal cord certain fluids. Okay, the anesthetic fluids they will inject. Okay, and the person will not be able to feel the pain sensation for certain time. Okay, so dermatome, it's the area of the skin supplied by a single spinal nerve. Any doubts?
No,
All right.
doctor.
The next one, plexus. Okay, what is the meaning of plexus? Plexus means group. Some of the nerves, you know that there are spinal nerves, right? So that is C1 nerve, C2 nerve, C3, 4, 5, okay, C6, C7, C8, okay, C8 nerves, and then T1, T2, T3, like that. There are spinal nerves. Okay, and you know that there is ventral ramus or anterior ramus. So now what happens, this anterior ramus or the ventral ramus, they unite with one another forming a plexus. Say C1, C2, C3, they might unite. Okay, say similarly C5, C6, they might unite. Okay, C7, C8, they may unite. Okay, so they will be joining with one another, forming a plexus, a group. For example, the cervical nerves, they will be joining together to form what is called as cervical plexus. Similarly, the lower cervical and the upper thoracic, they will join together to form a plexus near the arm. So this is called as brachial plexus. The lumbar nerves and lower thoracic nerves, they will join to form the lumbar plexus. Similarly, the sacral nerves and coccygeal nerves. Okay, so these are some of the plexuses which are required, which are present in our body. Plexus is nothing but the group of spinal nerves which join together. Okay, group of spinal nerves which join together and then supply different parts of the body. All right, so this is the plexus. Lastly, the autonomic nervous system. What is the autonomic? As the name indicates, it is auto. Okay, that is not under our control. Okay, autonomy, automatic. So what are these two group of nerves which are present in the autonomic nerves? Sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Now the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system, they have a pre and post ganglionic nerve fibers. Okay, so here you can see there is a ganglion. Ganglion is a swelling in a nerve. So there is a nerve which goes until the ganglion, which is called as preganglion. And from the ganglion, there is another nerve which goes out, which is called as postganglion. So preganglion, postganglion. Okay, so there is preganglionic and postganglionic nerve fibers. Okay, which passes along the spinal nerves. They also pass along with the spinal nerve. So mainly the sympathetic nervous system is concerned with flight, fight, and fear. Okay, that is the immediate response. Say, for example, like if an animal, a deer, okay, so it has seen a tiger which is approaching. So what happens? Immediately, it rushes itself to escape from the tiger. Okay, so that's the sympathetic response. Okay, so immediately they will react. Okay, it also occurs in humans. Suppose if you know that there is going to be something which is going to happen. Okay, so immediately our sympathetic responses they will pump. Okay, and then we respond. So the sympathetic nervous system, flight, fight, and fear. Okay, and these nerves mostly arise from the thoracolumbar spinal nerves. So they arise from thoracolumbar. You know that there is thoracic limbus spinal nerves, lumbar spinal nerves. What is it? What is the sacral spinal nerves, coccygeal spinal nerves, cervical spinal nerves. So mainly the sympathetic nervous system they pass through thoracolumbar spinal nerves. The parasympathetic nerve is just opposite to that of sympathetic. Okay, it is opposite. It stores the energy. Okay, it stores the energy. Okay, and helps in synthesizing. Okay, so synthesize and storing of the energy. Now, where do the parasympathetic nerves arise from? The parasympathetic nerves arise from craniosacral nerves. What is craniosacral nerves? Cranio means cranial nerves. Cranial nerves, you know, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay, the 12 cranial nerves. So it will be arising from the cranial nerves and from the sacral nerves. Okay, so it will be arising from the cranium as well as the sacral nerve. So these are called as sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves. Now in this picture here you can see this is the spinal cord. This is above the spinal cord, which is the brain. Okay, and here you can see this is a sympathetic part. This is a preganglion and postganglion. Okay, so similarly, preganglion, postganglion, preganglion, postganglion. So thoracolumbar. Okay, so it is sympathetic nervous system. Now here on the top, from the brain, there is one which comes out. So here, this is a parasympathetic. Okay, parasympathetic nerve. So here you can see the preganglion and postganglion. Okay, the pre and postganglion. So this is from the parasympathetic ganglion. So they are from the parasympathetic ganglion. So presympathetic and parasympathetic. No need to know the other ones. Just remember that there is a ganglia, a preganglion, and a postganglion. Okay, preganglion and a postganglion. All right. Any doubts in sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system?
Uh, only parasympathetic is only for storing energy.
Yes, it stores the energy. Okay, it stores the energy. Okay, whereas sympathetic is immediate. Okay, so immediate response. Okay, the details of this sympathetic and parasympathetic activity in your next semester, you will be learning it. Okay, so you will be learning about this. What is this ACH? Okay, NE, M, alpha, beta. All these things will be taught to you in physiology. Okay, so these are certain neurotransmitters: acetylcholine, epinephrine, norepinephrine. Okay, so this will be taught to you in detail in your next semester. Okay, but from the anatomical point of view, you remember that there is a preganglion and a postganglion. Okay, and the sympathetic nervous system is responsible for flight, fight, and fear. Okay, whereas the parasympathetic, they helps in storing the energy, synthesis and storage of the energy. All right. The sympathetic nerves, as I said, it's arising from the thoracic and the lumbar levels, whereas the parasympathetic nerves is craniosacral. Okay, which cranial nerves does it arises from? It arises from 3, 7, 9, and 10 cranial nerves, and also from the sacral nerves. Which sacral nerves? S, 2, 3, and 4. So which cranial nerves? What is third cranial nerve? Third cranial nerve is oculomotor. Seventh cranial nerve is facial. Ninth cranial nerve is glossopharyngeal. And the 10th, I hope this you know everybody. What is the 10th cranial nerve? Vagus. Okay. Remember, you need to know these all the names of the 12 cranial nerves: olfactory, optic, oculomotor, trochlear, trigeminal, abducens, facial, vestibulocochlear, glossopharyngeal, vagus, accessory, and hypoglossal. So all these cranial nerves you need to know. Okay. So S1, S2, S3, S4 spinal nerves, so which is craniosacral in origin, whereas the sympathetic nerves, they arise from the thoracolumbar. Okay, they arise from the thoracolumbar spinal nerves. All right, any doubts? All right. Now let's see about the spinal cord. The spinal cord, you know that it is a cylindrical structure and is covered by meninges, same like that of the brain. It is covered by meninges. It is continuous superiorly with the medulla of the spinal cord of the brain. Okay, so medulla of the spine of the brain, it is continuous on the top. The spinal cord continues and is attached to the brain through medulla. It extends from the upper border of atlas. What is the atlas? The C1 vertebrae is called as atlas. So from the upper border of C1 to the lower border of L1. Okay, to the lower border of L1 in adults. Okay, so it extends from C1 to L1, and approximately the length is 45 centimeters, and the thickness, imagine the thickness is as little as one's little finger. So it's really a tiny structure, the spinal cord. Okay, now these are the things which you need to know in a spinal cord. So here you can see the brain. Okay, it is attached to the brain by means of brainstem, the medulla, and this is the spinal cord. Okay, you can see like there are spinal nerves which are arising from the corresponding part, the spinal nerves. Okay, the spinal nerves. You know that the spinal nerves is formed by dorsal axis. After this, it is tapering. Okay, so the spinal cord is tapering towards the end. Okay, the end part of the spinal cord, okay, the end part of this spinal cord is cone shaped, and that's why this is called as conus medullaris. Okay, so it's called as conus medullaris. Whereas the coda equina means horse. Okay, horse. Cord, it looks like a horse tail. Why it looks like a horse tail? Because large number of spinal nerves will be coming from the lower end. It will be coming from the lower end. So it resembles like a horse tail, and that's why this is called as coda equina. Okay, coda equina. All right. So here you can see this is cervical area, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal regions. Okay, so all these are very important. Even a single spinal nerve, okay, if it is damaged, the person will be affected. Okay, so this is conus medullaris. The conus medullaris is the tip or the end of the spinal cord. Okay, and the number of the spinal nerves which arises from the bottom, so that's called as coda equina. Okay, coda equina. Okay, so the conus medullaris is the end point of the spinal cord. The coda equina is the spinal nerve near the terminal arrangement of the spinal cord. The phylum terminate. What is the phylum terminate? The diameter of the spinal cord continues down and is attached to the coccyx. So here you can see in the line nicely, this is the lower end of the spinal cord. Okay, and here you can see a cone-shaped portion of the spinal cord. Okay, you can see. Can you see a cone-shaped structure? So this cone-shaped structure is referred to as conus medullaris. Okay, conus medullaris. Now, from the tip of this conus medullaris, okay, from the tip of this conus medullaris, there is one thin thread-like structure which is coming down and getting attached to the coccyx. So that one is the phylum terminate. So in this picture also you can see the conus medullaris, okay, and slowly it goes and gets attached, okay, towards the tip of the coccyx, which is the phylum terminate. Okay, the phylum terminate. All right. So conus medullaris, cauda equina, and phylum terminal. Conus medullaris is the end part of the spinal cord. Cauda equina, okay, remember horse tail. So the spinal nerves, they are arranged like a horse tail, and that's called as cauda equina. And phylum terminal, the pyometer of the spinal cord continues down and is attached to the coccyx. You know what is pyometer, right? So the pyometer is a type of meninges. Meninges has got three parts: dura mater, arachnoid mater, and pyometer. So this one is a pyometer. All right. Now this is will be the last. Okay, so this one will be the last part of today's session, the spinal cord, the cross section. Now this already we have seen. Okay, so we have seen in the spinal nerves. So if you cut the spinal cord, you will be able to see both the white matter and a gray matter. Okay, so here you can see there is, so here you can see there is white matter and gray matter. Okay, the white matter has got two horns, a posterior horn and an anterior horn. The posterior horn also called as ventral horn, and the anterior is dorsal horn. Okay, sometimes there might be in the thoracic region especially, okay, so there may be a presence of lateral horn. Okay, so there could be a presence of lateral horn. Similarly, in the white matter, the part between the two parts, okay, the part between this and the midline, okay, until this one. Okay, so this one it's called as posterior column. Okay, the posterior one. Okay, and from this one to this one, so this part is called as anterior column, and the remaining part it's called as lateral column. Okay, lateral column. Okay, so dorsal horn, ventral horn, and lateral horn. Okay, similarly dorsal column, ventral column, and lateral column. Okay, so these are the differences between the horns and the columns. Okay, horns and columns. Any doubts? Okay.
Doctor, you mentioned
Yes.
something about the interior horn and the posterior horn. They have another names, I think.
Yes, I'll tell you again.
Okay.
Okay, so there is a central gray matter and peripheral white matter. The gray matter has got three horns: posterior horn, anterior horn, and lateral horn. The posterior horn is also called as dorsal. Okay, dorsal. Okay, any posterior it's also called as dorsal. Okay, the anterior it's also called as ventral. Okay, anterior horn or ventral horn. Okay, and similarly the lateral horn. Okay, the lateral horn mainly present in the thoracic level. Okay, the spinal cord at the thoracic level. Now commissures, what is this commissure? Commissure is the part which connects the anterior and the posterior parts. Sorry, the right and left parts. So this one is called as anterior commissure, and this part which connects both the right and left side, okay, this is called posterior commissure. Okay, so anterior commissure and posterior transverse commissure. Central canal. Where is the central canal? Here you can see the central canal. Okay, the central canal. The central canal is the one which is connected to the brain. Okay, so they are connected to the brain and is continuous with the fourth ventricle. Okay, this was a TBL topic, hope you must have read. Okay, so anyhow, I'll repeat it later when we find time. So central canal, it is continuous with the fourth ventricle. The white matter. Okay, the white matter has got columns, anterior, posterior, and lateral columns. Okay, so anterior, posterior, and lateral columns. Okay, so this is about the gray matter and the white matter. The gray matter has got horns, whereas the white matter contains columns. Okay, the posterior horn or the dorsal horn, they receive sensory nerve fibers through the dorsal root. This we have seen it, right? So they receive sensory nerves from the dorsal root, whereas the anterior horns, they leave out the motor nerve. The motor nerve exits from this region. Okay, so here you can see in the previous one which we have seen, the spinal cord. Okay, so here you can see this is the posterior horn, anterior horn. The dorsal root is connected to the posterior horn. Okay, whereas the ventral root is connected to the anterior horn. Okay, anterior horn and dorsal horn. Okay, and lastly, the spinal cord is also connected to the brain. Okay, it is also connected to the brain, and they contain a large number of neurons, okay, which are called as tracts. The group of neurons which do the same function, they are called as tract. For example, spinothalamic. Spinothalamic, these are a group of nerve fibers which travel from the spinal cord to a place called thalamus in the brain. We will see about the thalamus in our next class. Okay, to a part which is called thalamus in the brain. So this fibers, this group of fibers, they are called as spinothalamic tract. Okay, the next one is corticospinal tract. Okay, the corticospinal. Cortico means from the cerebral cortex to the brain. Sorry, to the spinal cord. Corticospinal tract. So this is the major tract which is responsible for the movements. Okay, so the brain orders are sent to the spinal cord, and from the spinal cord it goes to the other parts of the body to bring about the action. Okay, so the tracts, they are nothing but a group of neurons which carry the same function. Okay, so they will be starting from one point and ending in a different point. So they are named because of the place where it starts and ends. Okay, so here this one it is spinothalamic, which is from the spinal cord to the thalamus. Thalamus, the main function is sensation. It will process the sensory information. Okay, it will make the person realize that, okay, so this is a pain sensation, this is a temperature sensation. Okay, so it makes mainly the person to realize the sensation. Spinothalamic. The next one is corticospinal. What is corticospinal? The impulses pass from the brain, okay, to the spinal cord. Okay, in other words, it is a motor tract. Okay, motor tract. All right, so we'll just stop at this one. Okay, and then we will start the remaining lecture in tomorrow's class. All right, any doubts?
Dr. Commissioner connects between what and what?
The right and left sides. It connects the right half of the spinal cord to the left side. All right.
Yes, thank you, Doctor.